Your bank password is for family use, my mother said, like it was obvious. They thought changing my password changed the rules. They just opened the door to the endgame. Tonight, I'm bringing a thin briefcase. One real statement, one fake, and an ending no one in that living room sees coming. My name is Maren Ellsworth. I am 32 years old. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, and my life is built on code. Code is clean. It is logical. It is a world of absolutes, of inputs and expected outputs. My family, on the other hand, operates in a messy, chaotic gray zone of unspoken expectations and emotional leverage. I prefer the clean lines of my world. Tonight, the two worlds collided in a way that will incinerate the gray zone forever. The incident began at 2:43 in the morning. I was not asleep. I was working, tracing a kernel-level bug in a new build. My apartment was silent except for the click of my mechanical keyboard and the low hum of the servers in my closet. A high-altitude wind, typical for Flagstaff, whined against the glass of my patio door. I took a break, stretching my back, and picked up my phone to check the markets. I tapped the icon for my bank. High Desert Community Bank. The familiar blue and gold logo appeared, then vanished, replaced by the login screen. I had been logged out, a minor annoyance. I typed my password, a 24-character string of complex entropy. A small red banner appeared, invalid username or password. I frowned. I did not mistype. I used a password manager. I tried again, copying the string directly. Invalid username or password. A cold prickle, smaller than a pinhead, started at the base of my neck. This was not a glitch. This was an event. I clicked the Forgot Password link. My username was pre-filled. I tapped Continue. The screen that appeared said, "A password reset link has been sent to Pat Ellsworth, com." I stopped breathing. That was not my email. My recovery email was a secure Proton Mail account. This email, the one I saw masked on the screen, was an old family domain my father, Patrick Ellsworth, had set up years ago, an account he controlled. I was locked out. The pinprick at my neck became a jolt of ice water. The keyboard clicks and server hums faded. The only sound was the sudden, frantic roar of blood in my ears. I put the phone down on the desk, face up, as if it were a venomous snake I needed to watch. My training took over. This was not a family drama, not yet. This was a systems breach. I moved from my desk chair to my standing desk, where my primary workstation lived. My fingers moved with a speed that felt detached from my brain. First rule of a breach: verify the intrusion vector. I checked my personal email. No security alerts. I checked the secure Proton Mail account. Nothing. Of course not. They had changed the recovery email before changing the password. They were thorough. That, more than anything, told me this was not an accident. I opened a secure terminal and pulled the firewall logs from my home network. Nothing. The breach hadn't come from outside. It had come from somewhere with existing credentials. I navigated to my bank's web portal and tried to log in there. Same result, but the web portal offered a different link. Security activity. I clicked it. It required me to enter my username and the last 4 digits of my social security number. I did. A log appeared. It showed my own logins from my Flagstaff IP address, and it showed one other, a successful login. Time-stamped at 2:05 a.m. Just 38 minutes ago, the IP address was geolocated. Not Flagstaff. It was from my parents' zip code, in the suburbs outside Phoenix. The IP was registered to their specific internet service provider. They had done this from inside their own house. Second rule: preserve the evidence. My blood was arctic cold now, the rage replaced by a terrifying crystalline focus. I initiated a full device token backup from my phone, isolating the bank's authentication keys. I took high-resolution, time-stamped screenshots of the login screen, the recovery email it showed, and the IP log. I downloaded the raw log files, exporting them to an encrypted external drive. Every click was precise, methodical. I was building a case. Third rule: Contain the damage. I picked up my phone. I did not call my parents. I did not call my sister or brother. I scrolled past their names and dialed the number on the back of my credit card. The 24-hour fraud line. A machine answered, "Welcome to High Desert Community Bank." I navigated the robotic prompts. Card services. Report fraud. Speak to an agent. A tired voice answered, "Fraud department. This is Carol." "Hello, Carol," I said, my voice perfectly level. "My name is Marin Ellsworth. I am reporting a full, unauthorized takeover of my online banking profile. My password has been changed, and my recovery email has been redirected to an account I do not control. I need an immediate, total freeze on all accounts associated with my name and social security number." There was a click of typing. "A full freeze, ma'am? That's a drastic step. Can you tell me what—" The intrusion occurred at 2:05 a.m., Mountain Standard Time. I continued, cutting her off. "The login IP traces back to a known address. I am the victim of a targeted identity theft, likely by a party known to me. I need a lockdown, now." My tone, the precision of my language, cut through her late-night script. "Okay, Ms. Ellsworth, let me see. I'm sorry, but to implement a full account freeze, I need you to verify your identity in person at a branch. I can place a temporary hold on debit card transactions, but I cannot lock the entire profile without visual confirmation. It's to protect you." "I understand," I said, my teeth clenched. "I have already been compromised. When do your branches open?" 8 a.m., ma'am." "Fine." I looked at the clock. 2:58 a.m., 5 hours. "Schedule me for an emergency access recovery at the Flagstaff main branch, 8 a.m. I will be there when the doors open. Note the account. I want to see the branch manager, not a teller. Note that I will be bringing a passport and my original social security card. Note that I will be accompanied by legal counsel if necessary. The first person who greets me needs to be ready to execute a full identity restoration." Another pause, more typing. "I've noted the account. Ms. Ellsworth, Mrs. Pennington is the branch manager. She's very good. She will be expecting you at 8. "Thank you, Carol." I hung up. I did not sleep. I spent the next 5 hours cataloging my entire financial life, preparing for what I would find. I was a software engineer, a good one, and I had saved aggressively. I lived simply. But my investment portfolio was complex and, to my family's eyes, unimaginably large. A family I had helped, a family I had supported, hosted, advised, a family that was, at this very moment, robbing me. At 7:45 a.m., I was parked outside the High Desert Community Bank. The morning sun was bright, the air crisp and cold. I walked in at 1 minute to 8, my encrypted hard drive in my bag, my passport in my jacket pocket. Mrs. Pennington was, as promised, very good. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bun. She met me at the door, before I had even taken a step inside. "Ms. Ellsworth?" she said quietly. "Yes, thank you for seeing me." She led me back to her glass-walled office, clicked the lock on the door, and offered me a seat. "The notes on your account are alarming. Let's get you back in." The verification process was swift. She was a professional. She asked for my passport. She checked it against my file. She asked me 3 of the old-style security questions, the deep-cut ones, not the simple mother's maiden name. What was the name of the street you lived on in your first apartment? What was the make of your first car? What was the name of your high school's mascot? I answered them without blinking. She nodded, satisfied. "Okay, I'm initiating a temporary administrative password and resetting your recovery email to the one on file. You will need to create a new one. I am also invalidating all current login sessions." "Thank you," I said. "Please, turn your monitor." She did. She typed for a moment, then spun the large screen to face me. "You have temporary access. Please, review your accounts." I took a deep breath and looked. The summary page looked normal. My checking account, my savings, my investment link. Then I clicked Transaction History. The ice water from 5 hours ago returned. this time as a scalding, violent wave of nausea. It had been a busy 6 hours. $100,000, transferred at 2:15 a.m., to a checking account under the name Lila Ellsworth, my sister. Another $100,000 at 2:17 a.m. to Evan Ellsworth, my brother. $50,000 at 2:20 a.m. to Bryce, my sister's husband. $25,000, $10,000, $15,000, a series of smaller rapid-fire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize but could guess, all labeled family expense or quid pro quo. They were emptying me. They had stolen, in the time I was debugging a kernel, over $300,000. My hands were shaking, not with fear, with a rage so pure it was almost silent. "Mrs. Pennington," I said, my voice a stranger's, "I did not authorize any of these transfers, not one." Her face was grim. "I didn't think so. I need you to do several things for me immediately. First, I want a hard lock on all outbound transfers, electronic and wire. Nothing leaves my accounts without my in-person, verified signature. Second, I need you to print a full history of all profile changes in the last 90 days. I want to see how they did this." She was already typing. "On it." "Third," I said, the nausea turning into a cold, hard stone in my gut. "I see a co-owner was added to my primary checking account, Patrick Ellsworth." Mrs. Pennington froze. That was flagged for review, but the request was... When was that request made? She clicked, her eyes widened. 3 weeks ago, it was authorized via electronic signature. "I did not sign that," I said. "I have not seen my father in person in 6 weeks. He has never been a co-owner on my account, ever. That is a forgery. I need you to remove him, right now. I want his name stripped from my profile. I want all his permissions, all his access, revoked and logged. He is not my co-owner. He is a hostile actor." "Marin," she said, using my first name, her voice soft. "This is your family." "This is a felony," I corrected her. "Please, remove him." She nodded, her professionalism returning. "Of course." She worked for several minutes. "He's removed. All authorizations are locked. The accounts are frozen pending your new credentials." "Good. Now, I need one more thing. I need a new account. A shadow account, if you will. I want it linked to my profile. But hidden from the main dashboard, I want all my direct deposits and investment dividends rerouted there. Starting immediately. The accounts they just emptied? I want you to leave them. Let them look empty. I want to monitor all inbound activity to this profile, but I want my actual wealth secured. Starting the second." The manager said, "You want a sweep account that's invisible on the front-end UI. You want them to think they have control, but you want to be moving the assets." "Exactly," I said. "They think they've breached the castle. I want them to have the empty courtyard while I secure the treasury." She smiled, a thin, tight smile. "I can do that. It'll take a few minutes." As she worked, my phone, silent all morning, buzzed on the desk. A text. It was from my mother. Nora, a group text, to me, Lila, and Evan. "Family meeting tonight at the house, 7 p.m. sharp. We're ordering pizza. Don't be late." My thumbs hovered over the screen. The casualness of it, the arrogance. We're ordering pizza. After stealing my life savings, they were going to sit me down in the living room of the house whose IP address I had in my logs, and explain to me why this was all perfectly normal. I looked at Mrs. Pennington. She was finalizing the shadow account. I looked at the log files. I looked at the transaction history. I had 10 hours. I typed my reply. "I'll be there." I spent the next hour with Mrs. Pennington, building my arsenal. We printed every log, every transaction. We printed the e-signature form for my father's co-ownership, and alongside it, we printed 3 other documents I had signed in the last year. The forgery was good, but it was not perfect. The pressure on the T in Ellsworth was too heavy, a hesitation my own hand never made. I left the bank at 9:30 a.m. with a thick file folder. I drove not home, but to my office, where the industrial-grade printers were. I locked myself in my private office. I pulled out my laptop. I created 2 documents. The first was a complete, itemized fraud report. It detailed the IP addresses, the timestamps, the exact dollar amounts, the unauthorized e-signature, and the relevant state and federal statutes they had violated. It was a prosecutorial brief. The second document was different. It was a conditional settlement agreement. It was simple, written in plain English, not legalese. It stipulated a full, immediate return of all stolen funds. It stipulated a permanent, legally binding dissolution of any and all financial ties. It stipulated that they would never again, under any circumstances, ask me for money or access. And it stipulated, in very clear terms, the consequences of violating that agreement. The immediate filing of the first document. I put my private attorney, Ava Durham, on retainer. I scanned her the documents. "Ava," I said over the phone, "I need you on video standby at 7 p.m. tonight. I am walking into a family meeting that is, in fact, an ambush. I'm just bringing a bigger ambush." "Understood," Ava said, her voice all business. "Be careful, Marin." "I'm done being careful," I said, printing 2 copies of everything. "I'm just being prepared." I put the 2 sets of documents into 2 separate folders, and then into my thin leather briefcase. I had 10 hours. Now, I had 9, and a very long list of things to do. I drove home from the office in the bright, impartial Arizona midday sun, the thick file folder heavy on the passenger seat. The streets of Flagstaff were busy with tourists and students, all of them blissfully unaware of the 9-hour countdown timer clicking away in my head. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of clean code and quiet order, now felt like a war room. I locked the deadbolt, engaged the security system, and walked straight to the heavy steel safe hidden behind a minimalist print in my hallway. I spun the dial, the familiar clicks grounding me. The heavy door swung open. I bypassed the stacks of hard drives and emergency cash. Reaching for a small, fireproof box in the back, inside, under my original birth certificate, was a single, encrypted USB drive. I had made it 5 years ago, when I first liquidated a major stock option payout. It was my in case of catastrophe drive. I just never imagined the catastrophe would be my own family. I slotted the drive into my secure workstation. It contained high-resolution, time-stamped, and digitally notarized copies of my passport, driver's license, social security card, and utility bills. It was an identity verification package, designed to prove I was Marin Ellsworth if my digital life was ever completely compromised. I copied the files into a new folder on my desktop, ready to be deployed. Next, I accessed my bank account, the real one, the new shadow account Mrs. Pennington had created. It was invisible to anyone logging in with my old credentials. I looked at the balance. My stomach clenched, not in fear, but in a cold fury. They had tried to drain me, but they had only skimmed the surface. They had stolen $300,000, but they had left millions. My first priority was to make sure they could not get another cent. I initiated a transfer, not a small one. I moved the vast majority of my liquid assets, a sum in the high 7 figures, from the shadow account at High Desert Community Bank to my long-established, low-profile brokerage account at Vanguard Ridge Capital. The transfer was flagged for an immediate verification call. My phone rang 2 minutes later. "Ms. Ellsworth, this is Greg from Vanguard Ridge Capital, confirming a substantial inbound transfer. Can you verify this?" "Yes, Greg, I am," I said, my voice steady. "I am initiating this transfer. I am restructuring my assets due to a security breach at my primary bank." "Understood," he said, his tone shifting to one of concerned professionalism. "We will monitor the transfer. Your assets will be secured upon arrival. Estimated 60 minutes. Do you need a lock on your account?" "No, just secure the transfer. Thank you." While the money moved, I worked. I signed up for the bank's most aggressive alert service. Instant text and email notifications for any transaction, login attempt, or profile change, no matter how small. A $1 charge, a failed password attempt. I wanted to know. Then, I began to craft the bait. I could not walk into that meeting and show them my real portfolio. It would either make them too desperate or too greedy. They believed I was a high-earning software engineer, but they had no concept of my investments. They thought they had hit the main artery. I needed them to keep believing that. I opened a design program and began to build a fake bank statement, a decoy, as Ava would call it. I took a real statement from 6 months ago and began to edit. I left the primary checking account, the one they had just emptied. I left the connected savings account, also now near zero. But I created a new, plausible-sounding investment savings account. I gave it a balance, $123,500. It was a number large enough to be a target, but small enough to be believable for someone who had just supposedly been cleaned out. It was a number they might believe was all I had left, the nest egg I had hidden. It was the perfect decoy. I exported it as a high-resolution PDF, indistinguishable from the real thing. This was the statement I would show them. With the financial fortress secured, I moved to the legal and logistical front. I had 8 hours left. My first call was back to the bank, not to Mrs. Pennington, but to the number she had given me for the internal fraud investigator, a man named Mr. Klein. "Mr. Klein?" I said. "This is Marin Ellsworth. Mrs. Pennington connected us. I have a question regarding the conditional recovery of stolen funds." "Ms. Ellsworth? Yes, a terrible situation. How can I help?" "I am meeting with the parties who perpetrated the theft tonight. They are my family. I am going to offer them a non-legal settlement first, contingent on a full and immediate return of all funds. If they refuse, I will be filing my full fraud report with your department and the police tomorrow morning. My question is this: if they agree to return the funds, what is the bank's process? Can the transfers be reversed cleanly?" "That's complicated," he said. "The funds have already settled in their accounts. A reversal would be difficult. The cleanest method, legally, would be for them to initiate new transfers back to you. It shows intent. It shows acknowledgement. Get it in writing." "I plan to," I said. "Thank you. That's what I needed to know." My next call was to Ava. "Ava, it's Marin. I'm setting up the contingency plan. I need a conditional power of attorney, a dead man's switch, if I am in that house, at my parents' address, and I do not text you a specific code phrase by 8:30 p.m. tonight. I need you to assume I am being held under duress. I need you to forward the entire fraud package to the Phoenix Police Department and the High Desert Community Bank Fraud Department. Can you do that?" "My God. Marin," she said. There was no hesitation, just gravity. "Yes, absolutely. Send me the POA document. I'll sign it as your agent. What's the code phrase?" "The code phrase is, 'The peaks are clear.' If I text you anything else, I'm fine." "Running late?" "It's complicated. You execute the plan. Only the peaks are clear. Got it?" "Got it. Stay safe." I hung up and drafted the POA, signed it digitally, and emailed it to her. 6 hours left. Now for the evidence packet. I opened a new document. Timeline of unauthorized access and theft. I listed the dates, the times, the IP address, motive, a history of financial dependency, entitlement, opportunity, a forged e-signature 3 weeks prior, granting my father access, digital trail, the login from their home IP, the transfers to their specific, named accounts. Then, I opened my shared family photo stream. My sister Lila, bless her arrogant heart, had posted a photo just 2 days ago. It was a picture of her in front of a new, gleaming black SUV, a ribbon tied around it. In the background, my parents' garage. I zoomed in. There, in the back window of the vehicle, was the white temporary plate from the dealership. The timestamp on the photo was 2 days ago. The timestamp on the $100,000 transfer to her account was 12 hours ago. The family expense label on the transfer now looked like a confession. I printed the photo in full color. Next, I created the comparison chart. I was a software engineer. I solved problems with logic. Their entire defense would be emotional, built on a foundation of "we are family." I would dismantle that foundation with a simple, logical binary, I created a table with two columns. Column A, voluntary familial support. Under it, I listed holiday gifts, paying for dinner, advice on projects, spontaneous help. Column B, organized financial theft. Under it, I listed forgery of legal documents, unauthorized access at 2:43 a.m., password and email redirection, coordinated, multi-account transfers, concealment of assets. I printed this document as well. I called my investment advisor at Vanguard Ridge Capital. "Greg," I said, "it's Marin again. One more favor. I am going into a difficult negotiation tonight. There is a possibility that the opposing party will need to verify my financial standing. I need you to be on standby from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Mountain Time. If a call comes from my number, with my lawyer Ava Durham on the line, I need you to be prepared to verbally confirm, and only confirm, the total value of the assets under your management." "This sounds serious, Marin." "It is, but I am handling it. Can you do that?" "Of course. I'll be ready." Next, the notary. I Googled mobile notary Flagstaff and found one with a 24-hour emergency service. I called. "This is Mark," a gravelly voice answered. "Hello, Mark. My name is Marin. I need to hire you for a signing tonight. It will be at an address in the suburbs of Phoenix. I know it's a long drive. I will pay double your travel fee. I need you to be at this address, parked on the street, at 7:30 p.m., and to be ready to come inside when I call you. You will be notarizing a settlement agreement. There may be some tension." "Ma'am," he said, "for double travel to Phoenix, I'll notarize a peace treaty in a hurricane. Text me the address. I'll be there." I did. 4 hours left. I went to my desk, pulled out my offline password manager, a small USB device. I spent the next hour migrating every single one of my passwords to it. Bank, email, utilities, social media, everything. I then went through and changed all my security questions. No more, "What is your mother's maiden name?" No more, "What was the name of your first pet?" The new questions were unguessable, strings of random characters from a generator, with the answers stored securely offline. I pulled a small, black device from my desk drawer. It was a high-fidelity audio-video recorder, disguised as a simple shirt pin. Arizona is a one-party consent state. I had every legal right to record a conversation I was a part of, especially one I anticipated would involve admissions of criminal activity. This was not for social media, not for revenge. This was for civil court, if it came to that. This was my insurance policy. I charged it and clipped it to the inside of my briefcase, ready to pin to my blazer. Finally, I sat down with a simple piece of stationery and a pen. I wrote a letter to my grandmother, my father's mother. She was the only one in the family who had ever respected my boundaries, the only one who had never asked for a thing. I wrote that I loved her. I wrote that a difficult situation had arisen with her son and her grandchildren. I explained that I was taking steps to protect myself, that these steps were firm and non-negotiable, and that they were born from necessity, not malice. I told her that my relationship with her was separate, that it would always be, but that I could no longer participate in the wider family dynamic. It was my way of preempting the inevitable, "You're tearing the family apart" phone calls. I sealed the envelope, stamped it, and set it by the door to mail tomorrow. 2 hours left. I stood in front of my full-length mirror. I was dressed in a simple, dark gray blazer, dark slacks, and a plain silk shell. Professional, immovable. I practiced my opening line. I took a breath. "I am here because I discovered that at 2:05 this morning, you logged into my bank account, forged my father's name as a co-owner, and stole over $300,000. No, too accusatory, too emotional." I started again, calmer, colder. "I have here 2 folders." I would hold them up. "This first folder contains a complete fraud and forgery report, ready to be filed with the police and the bank. The second folder contains a settlement agreement. You have 30 minutes to decide which one you will sign." Yes, that was it. No arguments, no drama, just a choice. The code was clean. The input was clear. The output was up to them. I checked the time, 5:30 p.m. The drive to Phoenix took 90 minutes. I put the folders, the bait statement, the comparison chart, and the evidence into my briefcase. I pinned the recorder to my blazer and put my phone in my pocket. I grabbed my keys. The countdown was over. It was time. I arrived at 6:55 p.m. The 90-minute drive from Flagstaff had been a blur of high desert, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and violet that I usually loved. Tonight, it just felt like a timer running out. I pulled my sensible sedan onto the suburban street I grew up on, the one lined with cookie-cutter houses and overly watered lawns. My parents' house was the same as all the others, except for the gleaming black trophy parked in the driveway. It was the SUV from Lila's photo. It was angled perfectly under the porch light, catching the manufactured shine of its new clear coat. It was a declaration. It was parked not in a space, but at the head of the driveway, blocking the path to the front door, forcing me to walk around it. I did, my heels clicking on the pavement. I noted the temporary plate, just as I had in the picture. This was not a car. It was the proceeds of a crime, displayed like a prize. I reached the front door, my leather briefcase held firmly in my left hand, my right hand steady. I did not knock. I rang the bell. The door opened almost instantly, as if she had been waiting behind it. My mother, Nora, stood there, wreathed in the warm yellow light of the foyer. She was wearing a new cashmere sweater, a soft blue, and she smelled of white wine and expensive perfume. Her smile was blindingly bright, a practiced, perfect expression of maternal welcome that did not reach her eyes. "Marin, honey, you're here," she cooed, her voice as sweet and thick as sugar syrup. She pulled me in for a hug, her hand immediately finding a spot on my back to pat reassuringly. It was the same hug she used for calming a crying child or welcoming a distant relative to a funeral. It was a tool. "We were getting worried. Come in, come in. I poured you a glass of your favorite Chardonnay. It's in the kitchen." "I'm not thirsty." "Mom," I said, stepping past her onto the tile. The house sounded full. I could hear laughter from the family room, the tinny sound of my brother-in-law's voice. "Oh, nonsense. Everyone's thirsty," she said, closing the door behind me. The heavy thud of the lock settling felt symbolic. "Everyone's in the family room. We're so glad you could make it. It's a big night for us, for the family." "I'm sure it is," I said. I walked down the hall, my mother's hand hovering near my elbow, not quite touching me, a gesture of feigned guidance. The house was loud with manufactured joy. As I entered the family room, the conversation hit a lull, and all eyes turned to me. My brother, Evan, was standing by the built-in bookshelves, holding a large, rolled-up piece of paper. He was beaming. "Marin, glad you made it. I was just about to unroll these." My sister, Lila, was curled on the sofa, looking smug. Her husband, Bryce, sat on the armrest next to her. His phone held out. "Hey, Marin," Bryce said, not looking up from the screen. "Check this out. 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. Not bad for a family car, right?" He was scrolling through a gallery of photos of the black SUV, the same SUV in the driveway. And standing in the center of the room, in the traditional patriarch spot by the River Rock fireplace, was my father, Patrick Ellsworth. He was holding a rocks glass with a single large cube of ice and a splash of amber liquid. He held himself in a posture I knew well, his head of the table stance, the one he used for Thanksgiving toasts and delivering bad news. He looked, for all the world, like he was about to give a triumphant speech. The room was a perfectly staged tableau of domestic celebration. They had all dressed for the occasion. Evan's blueprints for his home renovation, Lila and Bryce's new status symbol, my mother's soft cashmere, my father's victorious pose. They were celebrating. They were celebrating the money they had stolen from me. "Marin," my father said, raising his glass a millimeter. "You're late. We ordered pizza." "It's 6:58, I said, checking my watch. The text said 7. "Well, you're here now," Nora chirped, bustling over to the sofa. "Sit down, honey. Sit down. Let me get you that wine." "I don't want any wine, Mom," I said. I did not move. There was a single, empty armchair, a stiff-backed wing chair, placed directly opposite the fireplace, opposite my father. It was the guest chair, the one nobody ever sat in. It was positioned like an interrogation seat. This was their stage, and I was the final actor to arrive. I walked over to it. I did not sit back. I sat on the edge, placing my briefcase squarely on my lap, my hands resting on top of it. I looked at each of them in turn. Evan, with his hopeful, naive grin. Lila, with her entitled, defiant smirk. Bryce, already bored and looking back at his phone. My mother, fluttering with a nervous, sugary energy. And my father, watching me over the rim of his glass with a look of calculating assessment. The silence stretched for a beat, a moment of awkward anticipation. My father cleared his throat. This was it, the speech. "Well," he began, "now that we are all here, I think it's time we made this official." He took a sip of his drink. "Your mother and I, and Evan and Lila, we've been talking a lot lately about the future, about what it means to be a family. A family isn't just people who see each other at Christmas. A family is a unit, an economic unit. It invests, it grows, it protects its own." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I held my breath, the tiny microphone in my blazer picking up the sound of the ice clinking in his glass. "We've decided," he continued, "to formalize this. We are officially establishing the Ellsworth Family Fund." He smiled, a broad, magnanimous smile, as if he had just announced a generous donation to charity. Evan unrolled his blueprints with a flourish. Lila sat up, a predatory stillness in her eyes. "It's a way for all of us to pool our resources," my father said, "to help each other. Evan needs a new wing for his house, for the baby. Lila and Bryce need a safe, reliable car. These are family needs, and the family must provide." "A family fund," I repeated, my voice flat. "I see." "Exactly," Nora said, clapping her hands together. "Isn't it wonderful? All of us, working together." "And," my father said, leveling his gaze at me, "we've taken the liberty of processing the initial contribution. It's from you, Marin." He said it without a trace of shame, as if it were a matter of simple logistics. "You see, Marin," he went on, "you're doing very well. We're all so proud. But you have a significant surplus. You're one person. You have no children, no mortgage to speak of. That surplus, it isn't productive just sitting in an account. It should be working for the family." "So you took it," I said. He frowned at my choice of words. "We allocated it, Marin. We allocated it to the fund, and to do that, we had to simplify the contribution process. Your mother and I, we're the administrators of the fund. We needed access to facilitate the transfers. That's why we had to update your security settings." He called it updating security settings. He called changing my password, forging an e-signature, and redirecting my recovery email, simplifying the contribution process. The audacity was breathtaking. It was a masterpiece of corporate, immoral doublespeak, applied to grand larceny. Lila, from the couch, let out an impatient sigh. "Oh, come on, Marin, don't look like that," she said, tossing her hair. "It's just logical. You are single. You don't have kids. You have more than you need. We are a family with 2 kids and another on the way. We have needs. It's only fair that you share." "This is sharing," Evan added, his voice earnest, as if he truly believed it. He gestured with his blueprints. "This is how it works. We're a team. And look, when you're old, or if you ever get in trouble, we'll be there for you. The family will. This fund, it's your safety net, too." The room was thick with their self-congratulation, their airtight, circular logic. They had built a reality where they were the heroes, the pragmatic caretakers of a resource I was too selfish or too naive to manage properly. They had already written the story, and in it, I was the ungrateful, difficult component that needed to be managed. I let the silence hang for 5 full seconds. I counted them off, watching as my father's smile became strained, as Lila's smirk faltered, as my mother started to wring her hands. Then, I spoke. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the warmly lit room like a shard of ice. Then why did you do it at 2 o'clock in the morning and forge my signature? The silence that followed was not a pause. It was a vacuum. The air was sucked from the room. Evan's blueprint suddenly seemed to curl at the edges. Lila's face went blank. My mother's hands froze. Mid-ring, Bryce actually looked up from his phone, his mouth slightly open. The only sound in the entire house was the loud, rhythmic talk, of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My father was the first to recover, his face, which had gone pale, darkened with anger. He set his glass down on the mantel with a sharp click. "Now you listen to me." "No," Nora interrupted, jumping to her feet. Her voice was suddenly high and strained, the sugary sweetness replaced by a sharp, panicked edge, the emotional tactical shift, right on schedule. "Marin, how can you, after everything we've done for you, the sacrifices we made, the private school tuition, the braces? We supported you when you wanted to move to Flagstaff, all alone. We have given you everything, and this is how you thank us? By accusing us? Accusing your father?" "I am not accusing," I said, my voice still level. "I am stating a fact. My signature was electronically forged on a bank document 3 weeks ago. My password was changed at 2:05 a.m. from an IP address registered to this house, and over $300,000 was transferred to accounts belonging to Lila, Evan, and Bryce. Those are not accusations. They are the log files." Bryce spoke, his voice lazy, arrogant. "Look, Marin, you're making this way more complicated than it needs to be. This is family. We can just set up a regular monthly transfer. You send a certain amount, say $10,000 a month, to a central coordinating fund. We manage it. No more drama. Easy." He was offering to negotiate the terms of my extortion. I looked at him. I looked at all of them. They were not going to stop. They would not, could not, see the chasm they had crossed. They saw no line, no boundary. They saw only their own needs, magnified by the word family. It was time. I kept my hands steady. I reached down and, with a deliberate, audible click, unfastened the 2 brass latches on my briefcase. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. I opened the lid. "This is not a negotiation," I said. I reached inside and took out 3 thin, standard white envelopes. I placed them side by side on the coffee table in front of me, fanned out like a hand of cards. "What is this?" Patrick demanded, his voice low and threatening. "This," I said, tapping the first envelope, "is a detailed report. It contains the login logs, the IP address, the time-stamped screenshots, the illegal e-signature, and the full transaction history of the theft. It also includes the relevant state and federal statutes you have violated, from bank fraud to wire fraud to aggravated identity theft." I tapped the second envelope. "This is a bank statement. It's what you were trying to find." I tapped the third envelope. "And this is a settlement agreement. It outlines a path forward that does not involve the first envelope." I looked up, meeting my father's furious gaze. "These are 3 paths," I said. "Choose one." My father stared at the 3 white envelopes on the coffee table as if I had just armed 3 separate explosives. He was not wrong. His face, which only moments before had been a mask of paternal, benevolent authority, was now hardening into a dangerous, mottled red. "What is this?" he finally demanded, his voice dropping to a low growl. "What is this theatrical nonsense? Marin, are you threatening us? In our own home?" "I am not threatening you," I said. My voice was quiet, and I kept it perfectly even. I did not move from my position on the edge of the chair. My hands remained folded on my lap. I am presenting evidence, and I am offering a choice. I reached forward, slowly, and picked up the first envelope, the one that contained the report. I slid a single sheet of paper from it and placed it, face up, on the coffee table. This, I said, is a screenshot of the High Desert Community Bank security log. It is time-stamped at 2:05 this morning, just after you thought I would be asleep. It shows a successful login, followed by a password change, and then a recovery email change. And this, I tapped a highlighted string of numbers, is the IP address that initiated the session. It is registered to this house, to your internet service provider, to your account. Patrick squinted at it, his pride clearly warring with the sudden, cold grip of panic. That could be anything, he scoffed, though his voice was thin. A glitch? A technical error? It's not, I said. I pulled out the second sheet from the envelope. This is the e-signature authorization form, submitted 3 weeks ago, to add you, Patrick Ellsworth, as a co-owner on my primary checking account, the document I supposedly signed to give you access. I then pulled out a third sheet, a document from my files. And this is the closing paperwork from my condo, which I did sign, last year. I've taken the liberty of overlaying the signatures. You can see it for yourself. I pointed to the screen print. Your forgery is good. Dad, I'll give you that. But you hesitate on the downstroke of the T in Ellsworth. You press too hard. It's a sign of deliberation. My signature is faster. I don't hesitate. Lila made a small, strangled sound. Evan, I saw from my peripheral vision, looked like he was going to be physically ill. That's not, Patrick started, his voice thick. It's a federal crime, I stated, cutting him off cleanly. Aggravated identity theft. The forgery is what makes it aggravated. I didn't stop. I turned my gaze to my mother, who was clutching a damask throw cushion to her chest, as if it were a life raft. And the transfers. They began at 2:15 a.m., according to the shared family photo stream, which you both subscribe to. Your phone, Mom, was unlocked and active at this house at 2:15 a.m. You even posted a sleepless night meme to the family group chat. Nora's face went white. She hadn't been sleepless. She had been monitoring the digital theft in real time. You even tried to hide it, I continued, pulling out the transaction summary Mrs. Pennington had printed for me. You labeled the transfers family expense and emergency fund. You knew, even as you were doing it, that this was wrong. You knew you had to create a cover story for the bank to avoid the automated fraud algorithms. This wasn't sharing. This was a planned, coordinated, and concealed operation to liquidate my accounts. My father attempted to regain his footing. You are blowing this wildly out of proportion. Marin, this is an internal family matter. Alone. We were going to tell you. Were you? I said. I picked up the second envelope, the moi, the bait. I slid the single fake statement out and placed it on the table. This is what you left behind. According to this, all I have left is about $123,000 in a long-term savings account. You took everything else. A flash of greedy, acute disappointment washed over Lila's face before she could hide it. It was fascinating. They were angry. Not that they had been caught, but that the well they had raided was not. In their minds, deep enough, they had thought themselves rich, and now they saw the number, and they were disappointed in me. I decided to press that nerve. I turned to my sister. Speaking of which, Lila, that is a beautiful new SUV in the driveway. The transfer to your personal account was for $100,000, flat. You posted the photo of it 2 days ago. That means you had already put a deposit down. Before you had my money, you were counting on it. You were spending money that wasn't yours, that you didn't even have yet. I leaned in, just slightly. A quick question. Where is the temporary plate? The paper one that was in the window in your photo, because the one in the window right now is a different one. Did you already register the vehicle in your name? Because if you did, using funds you knew to be stolen, that is legally defined as receiving stolen property, and in Arizona, for a sum over $25,000, that's a Class 2 felony, just like the car. The term is stolen. Lila shrank back into the sofa cushions, her face pale, her smugness completely gone. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered. I think you do. I didn't wait for her to recover. I turned my attention to my brother, who was still standing by the bookshelves, his blueprints clutched in his hand like a useless shield. Evan, I said, and my voice softened. Just a fraction, but it only made the words sharper. Your blueprints. They look wonderful. But did you even bother to apply for the home equity line of credit we talked about last month? The one I offered to co-sign for? Or did you just... Wait. Did you just assume I would pay for it? So you didn't have to go through the trouble of applying for a loan you could actually afford? Evan could not meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor, his face burning with a shame that was, at least, genuine. He hadn't even tried. He had just waited for the fund to materialize. Stop it! Nora suddenly shrieked. She jumped to her feet, the throw pillow falling to the floor. The sugary sweetness was gone, replaced by a high-pitched, panicked desperation. You stop this right now. Marin, this is exactly why we had to do it. You're cold. You're selfish. You're ungrateful. This is how a family works. We support each other. We take from where there is a surplus, and we give to where there is a need. It is our right as your parents. It is our right. It was the most honest thing she had said all night. It was the core of their entire delusion. Spoken aloud, that their need superseded my rights, that my property was, in fact, their property. If this is how family works, I asked, my voice deadly calm, my blood like ice, why did you have to change my recovery email to an account you controlled? If this was all above board, all just family helping family, why did you do it in the dark? Why not just ask me? Because you would have said no, Nora cried, her hands flying to her hair. Exactly, I said, letting the word land. And that is my right, a right you decided to take from me. You are a selfish girl, my father spat, finally standing up, looming by the fireplace. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at me. You always have been, hoarding your money, living in your sterile apartment in Flagstaff, looking down on us, on your family. This isn't about being selfish. Dad, this is about the law. I picked up the fraud report again, holding it not like a weapon, but like a textbook. Let's review. Title 18. United States Code. Section 1028. Identity theft. Section 1343. Wire fraud. Section 1030. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The penalties for which include substantial fines and, for a combined theft of this magnitude, up to 30 years in federal prison. The words 30 years hung in the air. They landed in the warm, comfortable living room and did not move. Bryce, the brother-in-law who had been so smug about his car, physically recoiled, as if I had splashed him with acid. I spoke to my bank this morning, I continued, my voice acting as the narrator to their sudden, silent horror film. I have already initiated a monitored recovery order. The head of the fraud department, a Mr. Klein, is personally handling my case. They are waiting for one of two things from me by 9 a.m. tomorrow: a notification that a full voluntary repayment is in process, or my final signal to transfer the entire case file to the authorities. They are already treating this as a criminal act. You wouldn't, my mother whispered, sinking back onto the couch, her hand over her mouth. Marin, you would not do that to your own family. You gambled that I wouldn't, I countered, my voice hard. You gambled that I was weak. You gambled that my shame and my desire for family meant more to me than my own life. You gambled wrong. I took my phone from my pocket. They all watched it, flinching, as if I had just pulled the pin on a grenade. I tapped the screen and opened a video call. A second later, Ava Durham's face appeared, professional and severe, in her well-lit office. Ava, I said, holding the phone up. Can you hear me? Loud and clear. Marin, her voice said, crisp and loud in the suffocatingly quiet room. Are we ready? "This is Ava Durham," I announced to the room. "She is my attorney. She has a full, time-stamped, unredacted copy of the fraud report you see here." My father's face was a mask of disbelief. "You brought a lawyer into this? A lawyer?" "You brought bank fraud into this," I corrected. "I also brought a notary. He's outside. I texted him from my car. He's a gentleman named Mark, and he is waiting on the curb in his car, ready to be invited in to witness your signatures." The air changed. The theater of family sharing and emotional blackmail collapsed instantly. It was gone. The performance was over. This was now, as I had intended, a mandatory negotiation. I picked up the third and final envelope, the settlement. "This," I said, "is your only way out. This is the only path that does not end with you speaking to the police." I slid the 4-page document onto the coffee table. It was written in simple English. No complex clauses, no loopholes. "This is a financial abstinence and repayment agreement," I said, my voice resonating with the finality of a judge's gavel. "It is very simple. It has 4 key provisions." I held up one finger. 1. You will, jointly and severally, repay every single cent, $315,450. That includes the money you stole, plus my legal and logistical fees for this evening. You have 30 days. I held up 2 fingers. 2. You will surrender any and all data you have of mine, old passwords, account numbers, security questions, my social security number, which you clearly have memorized. You will sign a sworn affidavit that you have done so and kept no copies. I held up 3 fingers. 3. You will agree, in perpetuity, to never access my data, my accounts, or my property again. You will also agree, for the rest of your lives, to never again ask me for money, not for a loan, not for a gift, not for a family fund investment, not on my birthday, not at Christmas, never. I held up a 4th and final finger. And 4, the penalty clause. If you violate any of these terms, if you are 1 day late on the repayment, if you accidentally try to guess my new password, if you so much as ask me for $1, this agreement is voided, and the full, unredacted criminal report is automatically filed with the district attorney. Ava has it in escrow, ready to go. There will be no second warning. I stood up, leaving the document on the table. The only sound was my mother, who had begun to weep, not with remorse, but with the terrible, raw sound of defeat. "You're destroying this family," she sobbed, her face in her hands. I looked at her, my heart no longer racing, but cold and still and certain. "I'm not destroying the family," I said, walking toward the hallway. "I'm just fixing my locks." I paused at the entrance to the foyer, turning back to look at them, a ruined, pathetic tableau of greed and consequence. "I'm going to send Mark in now. He has his stamp. You have 1 hour to sign." I walked out of the family room, leaving the 4-page settlement agreement on the table like a bomb. The sound of my mother's weeping followed me down the hall, a desperate, theatrical sound that was meant to pull me back, to make me feel guilty. I ignored it. I walked to the front door, opened it, and stepped out onto the porch, into the cool night air. The mobile notary, Mark, was exactly where he said he would be, parked across the street in a dark sedan, his interior light off. He saw me and his lights flashed once. I gave a single nod and motioned him over. He got out of his car, a heavy man with a surprisingly light step, carrying his own briefcase. "Is it a go, ma'am?" he asked, his gravelly voice low. "It's a go," I said. "They are reviewing the documents. Please, come inside. I'll have you set up in the dining room. It's adjacent to the family room." I led him into the house, past the foyer, and into the formal dining room. It was dark, used only for Thanksgiving. I switched on the overhead chandelier. The sudden bright light on the polished mahogany table felt like an interrogation lamp. Mark set down his case, pulled out his embossed stamp and his logbook, and took a seat, his back to the wall. He was a professional. He was now a witness. I turned back toward the family room. Ava was still on the video call. My phone propped up on the hall credenza, her image a silent, watchful judge. I picked it up and walked back to the doorway of the family room. They had not moved. My mother was still sobbing into the cushion. Lila and Bryce were in a furious, whispered argument on the couch. Evan was staring at the 4-page document, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't touch it. My father was the one who finally broke the spell. He saw me in the doorway, saw the phone with Ava's face still on it, and his entire demeanor shifted. The anger was gone. The denial was gone. He had moved on to the next stage of his strategy. Negotiation. He was a businessman, after all, or at least he played one at home. "Marin, stop," he said, holding up a hand. He sounded calm, reasonable. This was his "let's all be sensible" voice. "This is foolish. You're paying a lawyer. You've hired a notary? It's absurd. We are a family. We can work this out. But we have to be honest with each other." "I have been honest," I said. "Have you?" He took a step toward me. This is just paperwork. What really matters is fairness. We are trying to establish a fair way to manage the family's assets. That is all this is. But to do that, to make a fair allocation, we need to see the whole picture. We need to know your full financial capability." There it was, the sheer, unmitigated gall. He was demanding a full accounting, not to apologize, not to understand the damage, but to distribute it fairly. He was trying to turn his theft into an audit. "You want to see my full financial capability?" I repeated. It was not a question. "Yes," he said, nodding, as if I were a slow student who had finally understood. To be fair, I held his gaze. I walked back to the coffee table. I picked up the second envelope, the one I had labeled bank statement. The bait. "Fine," I said. "This is what you left me. You can see it." I slid the single-page, fabricated statement onto the table in front of him, the one showing the emptied checking account, the emptied savings account, and the single, hidden investment account with its balance of $123,500. Patrick snatched it up. He squinted at it. Lila, her tears momentarily forgotten, scrambled off the couch and looked over his shoulder. The room was silent as they read it. Then, Lila let out a sound. It was a laugh, a short, sharp, ugly bark of pure scorn. "This is it?" she said, her voice dripping with contempt. $100,000? This is what you were hiding? My God. Marin, Bryce makes that in a bad quarter. "It's nothing," Bryce added, scoffing from the couch. "You're a senior-level engineer at a top firm. We thought, this is pathetic. All this drama, for this?" They were genuinely, truly disappointed. They had risked their freedom, their relationship with me, their entire lives, for what they now saw as pocket change. Their greed was so profound that it had turned immediately to disdain. I said nothing. I let the silence hang. I counted 5 seconds in my head. 1. My father's face was a mask of confusion, looking from the paper to me. 2. Lila was looking at me with undisguised pity, as if I were a failure. 3. My mother had stopped crying and was just staring. 4. At 5 seconds, I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out another, slimmer envelope. This one had no label, no title. I placed it on the table on top of the settlement agreement. "What's that?" Patrick said, his eyes narrowing. "More fake documents?" "That envelope," I said, "contains the direct, private number for my investment advisor at Vanguard Ridge Capital, a man named Greg. He is on standby, right now, as we speak. He's waiting for a call from me, with Ava on the line, to verify my portfolio." Lila laughed again, though this one was weaker. "Oh, please, that's a bluff. That paper is fake. The number is probably your friend from college." "Call him," I invited. I slid the envelope closer to her. "The number is real, the man is real, and the assets are real. Go ahead. Lila, you think I'm a failure. You think what you stole was all there was. Pick up your phone, call the number, Verify it. She stared at the envelope, her hand hovering, but she didn't move. It was Ava who spoke, her voice cutting in from the phone in my hand, clear and amplified by the room's acoustics. I should remind everyone in this room, she said, that any such disclosure, whether by phone, paper, or in person, is entirely at my client's discretion. It is her right, not her obligation. Marin, you do not have to prove a single thing to them. That was the pivot. The word discretion. The word right. Patrick's eyes snapped up from the piece of paper. I could see the gears turning in his head. The anger was gone. The scorn was gone. A new, terrifying light had entered his eyes. A hot, frantic gleam of avarice. He had just realized the bait was fake. The scorn was misplaced. The lawyer's words, "You do not have to prove a thing," only meant one thing. There was, in fact, something massive to prove. He changed tactics so fast, it was like watching a snake shed its skin. "Wait," he said, his voice suddenly smooth, placating. He put a comforting hand on Lila's arm, pushing her back. "Lila, stop. Marin, wait, let's not be hasty." He looked at me, his eyes wide and earnest, a sick, counterfeit version of fatherly concern. "Marin, if that number is small, if that statement is inaccurate, that's fine. We understand. But if the real number is larger..." He licked his lips. "If the real number is larger, well, that's just good news. It means you're secure, and it means we can pay you back. Of course. We can pay you back much faster. It's an easier burden on all of us. Knowing you're not hurting." I stared at him. I had to marvel at the performance. He was promising to repay the money he stole, faster, if he could be assured that I had more money for him to steal later. I finally saw it. I saw them. It was not about need. It was not about help. It was not about family. They were not remorseful. They were not ashamed. They were just bad hunters, angry that their first trap had only snagged a rabbit, when they were now suddenly convinced a deer was nearby. They just wanted the vault. "So," I said, my voice dead, "you are not going to apologize." "We are sorry, honey," my mother chimed in, rushing to fill the void. "We are so sorry. Your father just means we're glad you're okay." "No," I said, "that's not what he means." I looked at Patrick. "You want to see the vault. You want to know what's in the treasury you tried to breach." I reached into my briefcase one last time. I pulled out the final document. It was a single-page, consolidated asset statement from Vanguard Ridge Capital, dated that very afternoon. It was real, it was notarized, and it was verifiable. "You want to know my financial capability," I said. "You want to know what you missed." I didn't give it to Patrick. I didn't give it to Lila. I walked over to my brother, Evan, who still looked like he was on the verge of collapsing. "Evan," I said, "you open it." He looked up at me, his eyes full of a pathetic, desperate confusion. He took the paper from my hand. His hands were shaking so badly it took him a moment to unfold it. He read the number. The blood drained from his face, all of it. He didn't gasp. He didn't speak. He just stopped. His breath hitched, a small, tiny sound, and he dropped the paper. It fluttered to the carpet. He took 2 stumbling steps back and fell into the armchair, his head in his hands, and he began to make a low, animal sound, a true, deep sob of someone who has just understood the scale of their own destruction. It was my mother who moved first. She scrambled forward, her eyes wild, and snatched the paper from the floor. She read it. She didn't sob. She just stopped breathing. Her hand went to her chest, her knuckles white. She looked from the paper to me and back to the paper. The number on it was so large, so far beyond her comprehension of me, that it had stunned her into silence. The total, the full, unmitigated, 8-figure truth. "Oh," she finally breathed. It was a single, hollow syllable. "Oh, Marin, Con. She was using my childhood nickname. You could, my God, Marin, you could really help us. You could help the whole family. For real. The room was silent, save for Evan's awful, muffled sobs. I looked at my mother. Her face lit with a grotesque, sudden, manic hope. She had seen the truth, and her only thought was how to spend it. No, I said. The word was like a slam. No, I said again, louder, colder. Help does not begin with an act of theft. Generosity does not begin with forgery at 2 a.m. This number. This is not a well you get to drink from. This is not a fund for you to manage. This is the proof of why you are so dangerous. This is what you were trying to steal. I turned and walked back to the coffee table. I picked up the 4-page settlement agreement, the one they had ignored in favor of the new, shiny number. I held it up. This is the only thing on the table, I said, and I want you to pay very close attention to Article 4, the penalty clause, the one that says if you ever ask me for money again, for any reason, after you sign this, the criminal report is filed. You just saw that number. My mother just asked me to help the family. That right there is exactly what this clause is for. If you sign this, that was the last time you will ever be allowed to say those words to me. Bryce, from the couch, finally spoke. He had been silent, his face a pale, pasty white since Evan had dropped the paper. You can't, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Nobody does this to family. I turned to look at him, this man who had accepted a $100,000 transfer without a single question. Family, I said, didn't do this to me first. I dropped the settlement agreement back on the table. The moi, the bait, had been taken. The real number, the shock, had stunned them. Now, they understood the stakes. They knew what I had, and they knew I was willing to burn them to the ground to protect it. Mark, I called out to the dining room. Get your stamp ready. I had called Mark in. He was standing in the doorway of the dining room, his logbook and stamp on the polished mahogany table behind him. The chandelier was bright, the light hitting the crystal and scattering cold, hard rainbows across the walls. He was a physical, impartial presence, a stranger who represented the cold, hard facts of the outside world. Ava was still on the video call, propped on the credenza, a silent, digital witness. The notary is ready, I said. My voice was loud in the stunned, sick silence of the room. He is here to witness your signatures on the settlement agreement. For a long second, no one moved. They were a frozen tableau of consequences. Evan was still broken, his head in his hands. Lila and Bryce were staring at the real asset statement on the floor, their faces a pale, toxic mixture of greed and despair. My mother was sheet white. It was my father who moved. He drew himself up, the blood rushing back to his face in a furious, mottled tide. He pointed a shaking finger, not at me, but at Mark in the doorway. Get out, he snarled, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Get this person, out of our house. This is a private family matter. Mark, to his credit, just looked at me, his expression neutral. He's here at my invitation, Dad, I said. This is blackmail, Patrick spat. This is coercion. You come into our home, you threaten us, you bring strangers, and you expect us to sign? We are signing nothing. So you are refusing to sign the settlement, I said. It was not a question. It was a clarification for the record. You're damn right I'm refusing, he said. Marin, please, my mother suddenly wailed, lunging forward. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my blazer. Please, honey, call it off. Stop this. He's your father. Look at him. You're upsetting him. You're going to disown us? This was the pivot, the last desperate gambit, emotional extortion. My father seized on it. She is, he said, his voice filling with a self-righteous, theatrical tremor. That's what this is. You are disowning your family. And for what? For money? I am not disowning you, I said, pulling my arm free from my mother's grasp. I am stopping you from stealing from me. There is a difference. If you walk out that door, Patrick roared, if you proceed with this performance, you are no longer our daughter. Do you understand me? You are no longer a part of this family. We will have no choice but to cut you out, for good. The tu kankai but hiu, the threat of disownment. It was the final bullet in their chamber, the one they had always held over me. I looked at him, at his furious, red face, and I felt nothing. The threat was meaningless. They weren't cutting me out. They were just a locked door I was no longer trying to get through. I turned my back on them. I walked to the dining room. Mark, I said quietly, my apologies. It seems we've had a refusal. I heard, ma'am, he said, his gravelly voice calm. A clear refusal. Would you please note it in your log? I asked. Signatories refused to sign. Time, 7:57 p.m. Already on it, he said. He took out his pen, opened his book, and wrote, his penmanship neat and clear. He then stamped the entry and signed it. That's logged. Thank you, I said. I will of course pay you for the full travel and your time. I walked back to the family room, where they were all watching me, their expressions a mix of terror and disbelief. They had expected me to beg, to break. This was your choice, I said. You chose this. I took my phone from my pocket. I did not call the police. I opened the clock app. The settlement offer, I said, the one that keeps you out of prison, is still on the table, but it is not on the table forever. I set a timer. I showed them the screen. 24 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. You have 24 hours, I announced. Until 8 p.m. tomorrow night. That is when your grace period ends. If my lawyer, Ava Durham, has not received a scanned, signed, and notarized copy of that full agreement from every single one of you, she will file the complete, unredacted fraud report with the Phoenix District Attorney's Office and the FBI's Wire Fraud Division at 8:01. There will be no further negotiation. There are no extensions. This is the last and final offer. My father scoffed. You're bluffing. Am I? I said. I picked up the fraud report from the table. I picked up the settlement. I did not take them. I let them fall back onto the wood. I'm leaving them here. I'm leaving the fraud report so you can read, line by line, exactly what 30 years looks like, and I'm leaving the settlement so you know exactly what your only alternative is. Read Article 4, the penalty clause, and then decide if I'm bluffing. I turned, my briefcase in hand, and walked to the front hall. I picked up my phone, Ava's face still grim and watchful. Ava, I said, did you get that? Every word, Marin, she said. The verbal refusal is recorded. The 24-hour deadline is logged. I'm preparing the escrow package for the DA's office. Thank you, I said, and ended the call. I walked with Mark out the front door, into the quiet suburban night. I left them there, in the house, with the 2 documents sitting on the coffee table. Their damnation, or their salvation. I paid Mark in the driveway, in cash, adding a generous tip. Thank you for your professionalism, Mark. Any time, ma'am, he said. He got in his car and drove away. I got in my own. I did not start the engine. I sat in the darkness, the street silent. I pulled out my phone and opened my high desert banking app. Mrs. Pennington had given me full administrative credentials. I navigated to the device management panel. I saw the list. Patrick's iPad, Nora's iPhone, family room desktop, Lila's MacBook. They had all, at some point, been authorized to access my life. My thumb hovered. I tapped Revoke All. A confirmation screen popped up. Are you sure you want to log out all other devices? I pressed Confirm. I then went into my settings and changed my password, the new one, to a new 64-character string of random letters, numbers, and symbols, one that I, myself, would not even memorize. It lived only on my offline password manager. Finally, I activated the new alert I had set up with Mrs. Pennington, the one with a specific trigger. Notify on all access attempts, failed or successful, originating from IP address, and I had given her the IP address from my father's house. The gates were locked, the walls were up, the sentries were posted. I started the car and drove away. I was halfway back to Flagstaff, on the dark, empty stretch of the I-17, when my phone, silent on the passenger seat, lit up. It was on Do Not Disturb, but the screen came to life. A call from Nora. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text message appeared on the lock screen. From Nora. You have broken my heart. I cannot believe you would do this to us. Your father is sick with worry. You are killing him. This is not about money. It is about respect. I kept driving. Another text. From Nora. Your Aunt Clara is calling me. Crying. The whole family is hearing about what you are doing to us. How could you shame us like this? After all we did for you, you are a terrible, terrible daughter. So, she was working the phones. The emotional pressure campaign had begun. Right on schedule. Another text. From an unknown number. Marin, this is your aunt. You call your mother right now and apologize. This is shameful. Family is more important than money. I did not reply. I was on a dark highway, the only light coming from my dashboard. The phone lit up again. From Lila. A private text. Not in the group. You can't do this. I'm serious. I told you. I already put the deposit down. I can't return the car. I'll be ruined. This isn't fair. Just take my name off the list. It was Dad's idea anyway. Why should I have to pay? Her speed at turning on him was as impressive as her cowardice. I pulled the car over at the next exit, a dark, deserted, scenic overlook. I picked up the phone. I opened a browser. I typed, "How to sell a new car back to a dealership." I copied the first link from a car buying website. I pasted it into my reply to Lila. I sent it. No other words, just the link. A new text. From Evan. Marin, I am so sorry. I really am. I didn't know. I don't know what I thought. Please, can't we just pay you back slowly? A little bit every month? And maybe we can keep the joint passwords, just so we are all together? His weakness was pathetic. He was apologizing while still asking for the key. I typed my reply. No, I sent it. A final text. From Patrick. You will regret this. This is the last line. You cross this. You are no daughter of mine. We will tell everyone what you have done, you ungrateful, unfilial child. The thread in writing, beautiful. I took a screenshot of Patrick's text, of Lila's, of Evan's, of Nora's. I attached them all to a new email. I sent it to Ava. Subject. For the file, post-refusal harassment. Then, I powered my phone off, completely. I sat in the absolute, high desert silence, under a sky full of cold stars. I drove the rest of the way home in peace. I got to my apartment in Flagstaff at 11:30 p.m. The silence of my own space was a physical relief. I made a cup of tea, my hands steady. I went to my workstation and sat, looking out the window at the dark outline of the San Francisco peaks. I turned my phone back on, not for them, for the alerts. It connected to my Wi-Fi. It buzzed once, an email. I opened it. High Desert Community Bank, security alert. The subject line read, "This is an automated notification," the body said. "A login was attempted for your account from a blocked IP address, 68.10xx. Access was denied. Time, 11:32 p.m. My father's IP address. My phone buzzed again. Another email. High Desert Community Bank, security alert. A login was attempted. Access was denied. Time, 11:33 p.m. And again? High Desert Community Bank, security alert. A password reset was attempted. Access was denied. Time, 11:34 p.m. They were still trying, even after the lawyer, the notary, the threat of federal prison. They had the settlement agreement in their hands, the one that said, "Do not access my data," and they were still trying to pick the lock. They thought I was bluffing. They thought I had left a back door. A small, cold smile touched my lips. They were not thieves. They were addicts, and they had just given me all the additional evidence I would ever need. I slept for 3 hours, a deep, dreamless, mechanical shutdown. I woke at dawn, not to an alarm, but to the sun cresting the mountains. My first thought was not of my family, but of the code I had been working on. The bug was in the kernel's memory allocation. I knew exactly how to fix it. This clarity, this cold, logical focus, was my greatest strength. It was the part of me my family had always misunderstood, had always dismissed as cold or unfeeling. It was, in fact, the very thing that was about to save me. The phone, which I had left charging on the kitchen counter, began to ring at 9 a.m., almost on the dot, as if they'd coordinated. It was my Aunt Clara, my father's sister. I looked at the screen, then silenced the call. A minute later, it rang again. My Uncle Mark. I silenced it. Then came the texts, a deluge of coordinated, emotionally charged shrapnel. They were all variations on a theme, a script my mother had clearly distributed. "Marin, this is your Aunt Clara. Your mother is beside herself. How can you treat your parents this way? They gave you life. This is your cousin David. I cannot believe what I'm hearing. Your father paid for my college books. He's a good man. You owe him your respect. Marin, it's Uncle Mark. A family is a family. Money is just paper. You're going to be old and alone one day, and you'll regret burning this bridge." It was a chorus of the entitled, the enmeshed, and the enabled. I saw the strategy for what it was. My father and mother had spent a lifetime building a network, not of love, but of mutual obligation and financial favors. They had loaned money to Aunt Clara, they had helped David, they had supported Mark, and now they were calling in their markers, deploying them as a personal army to shame me into submission. I made a simple automated rule in my inbox. All texts and calls from these numbers were to be archived on receipt. I would not see them. I would not read them. But there was one call I had been waiting for. It came at 10:30 a.m. The name on the screen made me pause. Grandma, my father's mother. I did not answer. I could not speak to her. Not yet. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I sat for a moment, the only flicker of doubt I'd allowed myself, but I knew what I had to do. I had prepared for this. I put on my running shoes, grabbed the letter I had written last night from my desk, and walked out the door. I ran the 2 miles to the post office. I felt the crisp Flagstaff air burn my lungs, a clean, sharp, purifying pain. I dropped the stamped envelope, the one with my neat, handwritten explanation, into the blue metal mailbox. The thud as it landed was small, but final. I ran back home. I showered. I sat at my workstation, opened my laptop, and fixed the kernel bug in 45 minutes. I ate a simple lunch. As I was washing my plate, my phone chimed with a text. It was from her. My grandmother's reply was not a plea. It was not an accusation. It was 6 words. Knowing how to set boundaries is also knowing how to love. I closed my eyes, took one slow, steadying breath, and all the doubt was gone. I saved the message. The community reaction, the one outside the family, was a different kind of mirror. I had to go to the office to finalize the build. My colleagues, my friends. Word had not, of course, gotten to them. But the few I trusted, the ones who knew my family was difficult. They split into 2 distinct camps when I gave them the most sterile, high-level version. My friend Sarah, a fellow engineer who had fought her own family over an inheritance, just nodded, her eyes full of a grim, hard-won respect. "Good for you," she'd said. "You're the only one who can stop the infection." My other friend, Jess, a lovely, kind person from a loving, kind family, was horrified. "But, Marin, couldn't you just talk to them? Go to therapy. They're your family. You can't just sue them. She could not understand. To her, family was a safety net. She could not comprehend that to me. It was a trap. I observed this split with the same dispassion I'd felt all day, and I saw the truth with chilling clarity. The people who called me cruel were the ones who had never had to build their own walls. The people who called me smart were the ones who were still tending their own scars. And the people in my family who were screaming the loudest, my Aunt Clara, my cousin David, they were the ones who had benefited the most from my parents' system. I wasn't just threatening my parents, I was threatening their entire dysfunctional ecosystem. I left the office. I went home. I made a quiet, anonymous donation of $50,000 to the Flagstaff Women's Shelter, earmarked for their financial literacy and independence program. I did not post about it. I did not tell anyone. It was a private balancing act. I spent the rest of the day in my routine. I did my work. I analyzed market data. I read a technical paper on new encryption methods. I did not check my phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, screen down, on silent. At 5 p.m., I went to check it. The deadline was at 8, 3 hours to go. The counter-offensive had begun. They had realized the emotional mob had failed. Now, they were trying to negotiate with the hostage-taker, not understanding they were the ones in the cage. First, an email from my father. Subject: Ellsworth Family Agreement. Revised terms. He had actually downloaded the Word document, enabled track changes, and struck through the entire Article 4 penalty clause. He had added a new clause: a monthly family dividend to be discussed and agreed upon in good faith on a quarterly basis. He was not just trying to escape, he was still trying to win. He was trying to turn his settlement for theft into a guaranteed future income. I forwarded the email to Ava. My message was one word: handle. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with the CC of her reply to my father, my mother, Lila, Evan, and Bryce. Dear Mr. Ellsworth, her email began, I am in receipt of your proposed revisions. This is not a negotiation. The terms of the settlement, including and especially Article 4, are final. The deadline remains 8 p.m. tonight. Any further attempts to alter the agreement will be considered a bad faith refusal. As of this moment, you have 2 hours and 47 minutes. The wall was not moving. A new text came in. It was from Lila. It was not words. It was a photograph, a selfie, taken from a low angle, of her face, streaked with, or perhaps misted with, tears. Her eyes were red. Her mouth was a perfect, tragic O of despair. I stared at the image, the performance of it, the sheer, calculated manipulation. I waited 60 seconds. I typed my reply. A transaction is a transaction. I hit send. A moment later, a different text, from Evan. This one was the most insidious. Marin, it read, I've been doing a lot of thinking. This has all been so negative. It's been terrible. But maybe this is a chance to reframe. A new start. I was looking at real estate listings. There's a duplex for sale on campus. I've been thinking, what if we pooled our resources? I know you've got the capital. I've got the construction know-how. We could partner. We could invest together, as a family. We could build real, generational wealth. This could be a good thing, not a bad thing. I read the text twice. He was still trying to get his hand in my pocket. He was trying to turn his repayment of a criminal theft into a business pitch. The audacity. The sheer, unbroken, unself-aware need. This time, I didn't reply. I didn't send a no. I didn't send a link. I just put the phone, screen down, on the table. My silence was the only answer he deserved. And that, I realized, was the key. My silence. They had spent my entire life operating in the gray areas, in the unspoken emotional contracts, the guilt, the shame, the passive-aggressive sighs, but they were now up against a firewall. They were up against a clean, logical, binary choice: sign or don't, yes or no. Their entire system of chaos and manipulation could not function against such a simple, immovable object. My silence was forcing them, for the first time in their lives, to be alone in a room with the direct consequences of their own actions. I made tea. I sat on my balcony. The sun was setting, and the peaks were turning a deep, cold purple. I watched the clock. 7 p.m., 1 hour to go. 7:30 p.m., 30 minutes. 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes. I was not nervous. I was not angry. I was not sad. I was at peace. I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would be fine either way. If they signed, I would get my money back and my freedom. If they did not, I would lose the money, but I would get my justice. I was in a win-win scenario. They were the only ones who could lose. 7:50 p.m., 10 minutes. My phone, sitting on the patio table, was dark, silent. 7:55 p.m., 5 minutes. Still nothing. They were going to push it to the wire. A final, pathetic power play. 7:58 p.m., 2 minutes. I took a sip of my tea. It was getting cold. I wondered, idly, what the inside of a federal courtroom looked like. At 7:59 p.m., with 1 minute to spare, my laptop chimed from inside the apartment. An email. I didn't get up. I just sat. At 8 p.m., on the dot, I stood, walked inside, and looked at my laptop. The email was not from them. It was from Ava. Subject, signed. The body of the email was short, as professional as she. Marin, received at 7:59 p.m., full, executed copies signed by all 4 parties. Their signatures were notarized by a mobile notary in Phoenix at 7:32 p.m. They met the deadline. The agreement is now in effect. The 24-hour clock has been replaced by the 30-day repayment clock. The hammer is down. I read the email. I closed the laptop. It was over. The notary's pen had fallen. The sledgehammer, the one they never believed I would even lift, had dropped. And it had not made a single sound. The 30-day repayment clock had begun. A silent, secondary timer. I expected them to wait until the final hour, to play one last game of psychological chicken. I was wrong. The first alert pinged my phone just 2 days after the signing. A wire transfer notification from High Desert Community Bank. $100,000. The sender, Lila Ellsworth. The memo line was stark, empty. The money just appeared. A digital admission of guilt. The second alert came the following day. Another $100,000. From Evan Ellsworth. His, too, was silent. No apology, no explanation. Just the clean, cold return of stolen capital. The final transfer arrived 4 days later, completing the repayment in just under 1 week. This one was the largest. $115,450. It came from a brokerage account, a joint account in the names of Patrick and Nora Ellsworth. The full sum had been returned. The agreement was, for now, respected. I did not have to ask how they had done it. The consequences wrote themselves, visible in the financial ripples they had created. I heard, through a distant family friend who knew nothing of the situation, that Lila's brand-new black SUV was suddenly back on the dealership's lot. It was now listed under certified pre-owned, with less than 200 miles on the odometer. She would have sold it at a significant loss. The depreciation on driving a new car off the lot is immediate and brutal. She had learned a lesson, one that had cost her probably $15,000. Do not celebrate with money that is not yours. Evan, I learned from Ava, had actually secured a high-interest personal loan. He had to submit his own pay stubs, his own credit score, and for the first time in his 38 years, stand on his own disastrous financial footing. The interest rate, Ava noted with a dry professional tone, was likely predatory, well into the double digits. He was now in debt, real debt, not to me, but to a bank that would not care about his childhood, a bank that did not respond to emotional blackmail. The most telling, however, was the final transfer from my parents. It had come from a brokerage account, Not their checking. I knew that account. It was their retirement fund, the one they had diligently built for 30 years. They had been forced to liquidate assets, to sell stocks, perhaps in a down market, to cover the theft. They had planned, I was sure, to use my portfolio as their comfortable, unofficial retirement plan. Instead, in their panicked, greedy attempt to secure it, they had been forced to cannibalize their own. They had seen the hole in their livelihood, the one that had been created by their own choices, and they had finally, truly, felt the terror of their own future. The money was back in my shadow account. It sat there, a sterile, silent number. I did not feel victory. I did not feel joy. I felt balanced. The equation had been solved. I did not celebrate. I fortified. The next day, I called Greg at Vanguard Ridge Capital. "Greg," I said, "I'm seeding a new charitable fund. I want to transfer the full amount that was returned to me. I established the Shield Fund. I set it up as a blind trust LLC. Its mission simple: to provide pro bono legal counsel and emergency financial aid to victims of familial financial abuse. I seeded it with exactly $315,450, the exact sum. The money would never be mine again. It was now a tool, a weapon, a wall for someone else. Then, I began to build my own walls, digital and legal. I spent an afternoon on the phone with fraud departments, not as a victim, but as a strategist. I implemented a no-family recovery policy on every single account I owned. No bank, no utility, no credit card, no brokerage would ever again ask me, "What is your mother's maiden name?" My new security questions were not questions. They were SHA-256 hash strings, with the answers stored on my offline password manager, a device that lived in my safe. My identity was now an island, inaccessible from their shore. I went into my email. I set up a new filter. It was beautifully simple. Any email from the addresses of Patrick, Nora, Lila, or Bryce that contained any of the following keywords: money, loan, help, investment, fund, dividend, share, or opportunity would be automatically marked as read and permanently archived in a folder I would never open. The folder was labeled, simply, closed. 3 weeks later, with the legal dust settled and my new firewalls in place, I closed on the house. It was the house I had been watching on listings for 6 months, the one I had assumed was a someday dream. It was a clean, minimalist structure of glass, steel, and warm cedar, high on a ridge north of the city. Its entire back wall was a single pane of glass, giving it an unobstructed panoramic view of the San Francisco peaks. It was an extravagant, unapologetic purchase, a declaration in architecture. It was the first house I had ever bought. It was mine. I did not have a housewarming party. That felt too much like a family event. Instead, 2 weeks after I moved in, I had a signing party. There were only 3 guests: Ava, my lawyer, Greg, my financial advisor from Vanguard Ridge, and my friend Sarah, the engineer who had simply nodded when I told her. We sat on the still bare hardwood floor of the great room. There was no furniture yet, just boxes. I had not bought a single plate. We ate gourmet pizza from cardboard boxes and drank a ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne from red plastic cups. We did not talk about the settlement. We did not mention my family. We talked about code, about the markets, about Ava's upcoming trial, and mostly, we just sat in a comfortable, quiet peace, watching the sunset bleed purple and orange over the peaks. As Ava was leaving, she paused at the door. "Marin," she said, "now you have real property, a real estate asset, plus your portfolio. You need a will, a real one, ironclad." She was right. I met her the following week. We drafted it. It was the ultimate act of financial control. My estate was not complex. I left nothing, not a single dollar, not a single book, to Patrick, Nora, Lila, or Evan. My entire portfolio and the equity from my home were to be liquidated, with the full proceeds transferred to the Shield Fund to continue its work after I was gone. I made one exception. I established a perpetual scholarship at Northern Arizona University, my local college, the First Light Engineering Scholarship, a full 4-year ride, to be awarded annually. The only requirement was that the applicant must be the first person in their immediate family to attend college. I did not block my family's numbers. I did not excommunicate them. That would have been a different kind of war, a dramatic, emotional one. This was not about emotion. This was about order. When my mother sent a group text with a picture of her roses, I replied, "Very nice." When Evan sent a picture of his kids, I liked it. But the financial umbilical, the one they had tried to turn into a siphon, was severed. We were politely distant. We were strangers who shared a blood history. A week later, a small, cream-colored envelope arrived at my new house. It was not a bill. It was not junk mail. The return address was just Grandma. Her handwriting was shaky, but the elegant cursive was unmistakable. I opened it, a knot tightening in my stomach. It was a simple, heavy stock card with a pressed flower on the front. Inside, she had written only one sentence. "Freedom has a price. You paid the right one." I read the words 3 times. I closed the card. I walked into my new home office, where my new safe was bolted to the frame of the house. I opened it. I placed the small, cream-colored card inside. I set it on the shelf, right next to the small, silver USB drive that held the logs, the screenshots, and the time-stamped IP address from that night, the evidence, and the absolution. That evening, an email came through. It bypassed the closed filter because it contained none of the keywords. It was from Evan. The subject line was, "I'm sorry." The body of the email was just that, a single line. "I am truly, truly sorry. Marin, I know it doesn't mean anything, but I am." I stared at the words. He was right. It did not mean anything. It was an ash, a single ash, from a fire that had already been extinguished. It was a request for my emotional labor, for my forgiveness, to make him feel better. My finger hovered over the reply button. I had so many things I could say. Instead, I highlighted the email. I did not archive it. I clicked delete. A pop-up asked, "Permanently delete this message?" I clicked OK. The email and the apology vanished. I closed my laptop. I walked to the great room, turned off the lights, and looked out at the dark, silent mountains. My house was secure. My accounts were locked. My passwords were my own, and for the first time in my entire life, I was the only one who held the key. The 30 days of the repayment clock had passed. The money was back in my account, and I had, in turn, given it away. My new house was quiet. My new firewalls were silent. I had established a new, sterile politeness with my family. A low bandwidth connection of liked photos and very nice replies to flower pictures. I had, foolishly, allowed myself to believe it was over. It was not over. It was just an intermission. The next phase of the war began not with a bang, but with a ping. It was a Tuesday night. I was at my workstation, optimizing a query for a database, when a text message appeared on my screen. It was from Lila, but it was not for me. It was a screenshot of a group chat I was not in. The title of the group was Ellsworth Family Council. The members included Patrick, Nora, Lila, Bryce, Evan, Aunt Clara, and Cousin David. The screenshot captured a specific damning exchange. "Bryce, he's a friend from the golf course, but he's a good lawyer. He said it's a gray area, but filial responsibility is a real thing. She can't just let her parents starve." Patrick, filial responsibility. I like that. That's the angle. Not a request. A fee. A parental support fee. We'll draft a proposal. Aunt Clara, absolutely. She has a moral, if not legal, obligation. It's the Christian thing to do. Bryce, my guy says we can send a demand letter. It puts the pressure on. He'll do it for $5,000. Nora, is that a good idea? She was so angry. Patrick, it's time to stop being afraid of her. She has all the money. We have all the need. The law is supposed to be fair. And then, under the screenshot, a new frantic text from Lila, clearly sent a second after she realized her mistake. Oh my God. Marin, do not look at that. That was a mistake. Delete it, please. It's just Dad talking. He's just upset. Delete it. I stared at the screen. My hands did not shake. My heart did not race. The cold, crystalline focus I'd felt that first night returned. But this time, it was not hot with rage. It was Arctic. They had signed a legally binding document, notarized and witnessed, agreeing to never make another financial demand of me, under penalty of criminal prosecution. And here they were, in writing, conspiring with a golf course lawyer to invent a new way to get into my accounts. They were actively, methodically, and with legal counsel, planning to violate the settlement. I did not text Lila back. I did not call her. I did not block her. I took a screenshot of her text message. I took a screenshot of the group chat she had sent. I attached both images to a new email. I sent it to Ava. Subject: Article 4 violation. Evidence. Ava's reply came 3 minutes later. Got it. This is a direct, provable breach of the No Further Demands clause. The parental support fee is a clear financial claim. This is all I need. Marin, I am drafting the petition for a permanent financial restraining order. With this, we can get a judge to make it a crime for them to even contact you about money. They had signed the agreement, they had paid the money, and they still had not learned. They were like rats in a maze, pressing the same, failed button for a reward, over and over, expecting a different result. The next day, a package arrived at my new house. It was not from a delivery service. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope, just like my grandmother's, but it had been left in my mailbox, bypassing the postal service. My father had driven here. He had been to my new home. The thought made my skin crawl. Inside was a handwritten letter, on his thick, personalized Patrick Ellsworth stationery. It was 6 pages long. It was not an apology. It was a demand, wrapped in the language of a victim. It talked about his sacrifices. It talked about the humiliation I had put him through. It talked about the unfairness of the world. And then, it got to the point. He was formally requesting a renegotiation of our understanding. He said the settlement was signed under duress, a claim my video recording and the notary's presence would vaporize, and that he was proposing a new, more equitable arrangement. Stapled to the back of the letter was a proposal. It outlined a modest quarterly transfer from me to him, to be managed and distributed by him as the head of the family. He had not just violated the agreement, he had put it in his own handwriting, signed his name to it, and hand-delivered the evidence to my door. This time, I replied, I took out a single sheet of my own, plain white copy paper. I wrote 3 sentences. Patrick, I am in receipt of your letter. This is my final and only warning. You are in direct violation of Article 4 of the legally binding settlement you signed. Cease and desist. I did not sign it Love Marin. I did not sign it Your Daughter. I just put it in a plain white envelope, addressed it to him at his house, and put a stamp on it. The breach was now documented from both sides. They went silent for a week. I knew this was not the end. They were regrouping. Their legal threat had failed. Their written demand had been rebuffed. There was only one weapon left in their arsenal: public, emotional shame. The call came from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was the pastor from the community church my parents had attended my entire life. Marin, Pastor Davies said, his voice a smooth, practiced baritone. Your parents are in a state of great distress. We are all worried about them. They are feeling a great sense of spiritual crisis about their family, about you. I understand your concern, Pastor, I said, my voice polite. They have requested a meeting, a reconciliation, not a legal meeting. My dear, a heart-to-heart. In a place of peace. Here, at the church, after service this Sunday. Just you and them. To talk. To heal. Will you come? It was the perfect trap. A public setting. A man of God as a witness. An appeal to healing that was designed to make me the villain if I refused. I will be there, I said. Thank you for arranging it. Oh, wonderful, my child. Wonderful. 10:30 a.m., after the service, in my office. I'll be there, I said again, and hung up. I immediately called Ava. They've escalated. The church, she said, her voice dry. Of course, the honor tactic. It's a classic move. You're not going. Of course. I am going, I said. Marin, that's a terrible idea. It's an ambush. You'll be alone. They'll have the pastor on their side. I won't be alone, I said. I need you to do two things. First, I need you to call Mark, the notary. Tell him I'll pay triple his Sunday rate. I need him at that church at 10:30 a.m. Second, I need a neutral witness, a court reporter. Maybe someone official. Better, Ava said, a new energy in her voice. Not a court reporter. I'll hire an off-duty police officer, someone who can just stand there, in his uniform. As a neutral witness for a civil document signing, it's perfectly legal, and a lot more persuasive. Perfect, I said. One more thing. I need you on video standby at 10:30 sharp. Sunday was bright and painfully sunny. I did not go to the service. I arrived at the church at 10:29 a.m. I was not dressed for church. I was dressed as I had been before. A dark blazer, dark slacks, my battle armor. Mark, the notary, was waiting by the fountain, his briefcase in hand. Ma'am, he nodded. Didn't think I'd see you again so soon. This should be the last time, Mark, I said. A moment later, a tall man in a crisp police uniform walked up. Ms. Ellsworth? Ava Durham sent me. Officer Miller. I'm here as a neutral witness. Thank you for coming, officer, I said. The three of us walked into the church. The main service was letting out. The congregation spilling into the lobby. A sea of Sunday dresses and sports coats. I saw my parents standing with Pastor Davies near the office. My father, in a suit. My mother, in a pale blue dress, a string of pearls around her neck. They looked the part. Pillars of the community. Wounded, dignified. When they saw me, they smiled. A look of profound, sad relief. When they saw the notary and the uniformed police officer walking behind me, their smiles froze, then curdled. Marin, Pastor Davies said, stepping forward, his face a mask of confusion. What? What is this? I said this was a meeting to heal. It is, I said, walking past him. These are just my counselors. Please, officer. Mr. Mark, you can stand by the door. We all entered the pastor's office, a small, wood-paneled room. It was suddenly very, very crowded. My father, my mother, Pastor Davies, me, the notary, and a uniformed cop. Now, Marin, Pastor Davies began, wringing his hands. Your parents, they just want to talk. They feel there has been a terrible misunderstanding. My mother, right on cue, began to weep, a quiet, dignified, church-appropriate sob. We just miss our daughter, she whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. This was never about money, darling. It was about being a family. My father put a strong, comforting arm around her. Marin, he said, his voice thick with a counterfeit, noble pain. We don't want to fight. We want to love you. All that. Paperwork. That's not what's important. What's important is what's in here. He tapped his chest. Family, honor, the things we taught you. We forgive you for your anger. The performance was stunning. They were going to try to rewrite the entire event, to erase the theft, the forgery, the logs, and recast this as a simple, emotional spat. They were avoiding the facts entirely. I let them talk for a full minute. I let them dig their own graves, layering on the sentiment, the good old days, The time you fell off your bike, all of it. I waited until my father paused to take a breath. Then, I reached into my briefcase. I did not pull out the settlement. I did not pull out the screenshot from Lila. I pulled out a single, fresh sheet of paper. I placed it gently on the pastor's desk, in the middle of his Bible. "I understand," I said, my voice very, very quiet. "But you seem to have forgotten this." Patrick leaned in to look. Pastor Davies leaned in. It was a single page. It was the security log from High Desert Community Bank. The other log, the one from 11:32 p.m., 11:33 p.m., and 11:34 p.m. on the night of the settlement. The one showing the 3 failed login attempts from their IP address after I had left, after they had been warned. My father's face went from dignified sadness to confusion, to a sudden, terrible, ashen gray. His jaw went slack. He understood. He did not just understand what the paper was. He understood that it meant I had saved everything. He understood that his attempt to log in was, in itself, another documented, time-stamped, provable violation of the agreement he had not even signed yet. He understood, in that single, silent moment, that I had been watching him when he thought he was in the dark. I looked at him. "That," I said, "is the log of you attempting to breach my new security. The same night you refused to sign the settlement. I have a log for every single violation. The screenshot from Lila, the handwritten demand for renegotiation, all of it." The pastor looked at the paper, then at my father, his face full of a sickening, dawning comprehension. My phone was on the desk, vibrating. It was Ava. I tapped the screen and put her on speakerphone. "Ava," I said, "we're all here. My parents, Pastor Davies, a notary, and Officer Miller." "Excellent." Ava's voice filled the room, cold and sharp. "Mr. Klein, the investigator from High Desert's Fraud Division, is on standby for me as well. He is ready to take my call, which he will then forward to the Phoenix DA. We are all waiting on your signal. Marin." The room was a tomb. My mother's sobbing had stopped, frozen in her throat. My father was not breathing. I looked at him. I looked at my mother. I looked at the pastor. "You said this was about honor," I said. "So, you have a choice. Right now, you can save your honor, or you can go to court. Which is it?" My father looked at the log. He looked at the uniformed police officer. He looked at the phone. "Honor," he whispered, the word like sand in his mouth. We choose honor." My father had chosen honor. The word was hollow, a broken shell, but it was the only one he had left. Pastor Davies, his face pale and his spiritual authority completely gone, looked lost in his own office. "Perhaps," he stammered, "we should use the conference room. It's more appropriate." I just nodded. He led the way, a silent, funereal procession down the carpeted hall. My father. His shoulders slumped, his suit suddenly looking too large for him. My mother. Her hand over her mouth, her quiet sobs now sounding dry and small. Evan, Lila, and Bryce followed, a small, defeated herd. Officer Miller and Mark the notary followed me. We entered a large, sterile room with a long, polished mahogany table under fluorescent lights. It felt less like a church and more like a boardroom for a company that was about to declare bankruptcy. "Please, be seated," the pastor whispered, and then he backed out of the room, closing the door, eager to escape the judgment that was not his. We sat, my family on one side of the long table. I sat at the head, Officer Miller and Mark standing behind me, by the door. Mark stepped forward. He placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with 2 loud clicks. He did not pull out 1 document. He pulled out 3, in triplicate. "Per my client's instructions," Ava's voice said, still on speakerphone from my phone on the table, "we have 3 new documents for your signature. These are non-negotiable and will finalize this matter." Mark placed the first stack in front of my father. "This," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the sterile room, is the confirmation of compliance. It is a simple document that states you have fulfilled the repayment terms of the first settlement. It is a receipt. We sign it to close that chapter. Mark placed the second stack down. This, I said, is the unconditional apology. It is a letter, addressed to me, in which you will state, in your own words, that you knowingly and without authorization accessed my financial accounts and converted funds for your own use. You will state that this was a violation. You will state that you are sorry. A confession, Patrick whispered, his voice hoarse. The truth, I corrected. And this, I said, as Mark placed the final thickest stack on the table, is the one you will learn to fear. This is a court-enforceable, permanent declaration of non-solicitation. It expands Article 4 of our original agreement. It makes any future request for money, in any form, a letter, a phone call, a text, a parental support fee, a family emergency, a direct act of contempt of court, punishable by immediate legal action. It means never, in a way a judge can understand. My father put his hands on the table. He was shaking. He was a trapped animal, and he knew it. But the trapped animal still had one last bite. I can't, he stammered, looking at the apology letter. I won't. What if your mother is sick? What if one of us is in the hospital, dying? You would have us gagged by a legal document? He looked at me, his eyes pleading for one last spark of the old dynamic. We have to add a clause, unless the family is in an extreme medical or financial situation. The last desperate attempt to leave a crack in the door. No, I said. That's a negative, Mr. Ellsworth. Ava's voice was like ice. The word unconditional is the only word that matters. Any attempt to add a condition will be considered a refusal to sign. Evan suddenly shoved his chair back. It scraped loudly on the floor. I'm not signing this, he said, his voice high and panicky. He was looking at the apology letter. I am not signing a confession. You're trying to trick us. I'm out. I'm leaving. He stood up and turned to walk toward the door, toward Officer Miller. Evan, sit down. The voice was not mine. It was Nora's, my mother, who had been a weeping, delicate flower, was suddenly a cornered wolverine. She lunged, grabbing Evan's arm, her fingernails digging into his sleeve. She physically yanked him back, shoving him into his chair. You will not move, she hissed, her face inches from his, her church tears gone. If you walk out that door, you destroy us all. You will sit there, and you will sign. Do you understand me? Evan, stunned by her venom, just collapsed back into the chair, his face ashen. This was the moment, the final crack. I tapped my phone, activating the pre-dialed number. Ava, I said, patch him in. Right away, she said. A new click, and the line connected. This is Klein, High Desert Fraud Division. I'm on the line. A new, deep, all-business voice said. Mr. Klein, I said clearly. This is Marin Ellsworth. I am in a room with the 5 individuals responsible for the breach. Patrick, Nora, Lila, and Evan Ellsworth, and Bryce. They are currently hesitating to sign the final civil settlement and apology. I see, Mr. Klein's voice said, booming with the sterile authority of the bank. Well, that's their choice. I am sitting here, Ms. Ellsworth, with the complete criminal file. It includes the IP logs, the forged e-signature, the transaction history, and, I see here, a new file from your attorney regarding screenshots of a conspiracy to commit further financial demands. My finger is on the button. All I need is your verbal confirmation. And this entire package, with a strong recommendation to prosecute, is sent to the district attorney's office. I am ready to submit this file at any time. Just say the word. The room was so quiet. I could hear the fluorescent lights hum. They understood the prison part, but I needed them to understand the honor part. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out the final document, the one, real, verified, multi-page, 8-figure asset statement. I did not give it to them. I placed it, gently, in the center of the polished mahogany table. "You are worried about your honor." "Dad," I said quietly. "You are worried about what people will think. This is what you were trying to find. This is my actual, verifiable net worth. This is the number that Mr. Klein will include in his report as the scale of the attempted fraud. This is the number that will be read in open court when your golf course lawyer sues me for filial responsibility and I countersue. This is the number that the newspapers will print when they report on a wealthy, prominent suburban family who was arrested for forging documents to steal from their own daughter." I let that sink in. The room was not breathing. They understood. If they fought, they did not just lose their freedom, they would lose their face. They would be exposed, not just as criminals, but as pathetic, bumbling, failed criminals. And for my father, the shame of that was a fate worse than any prison. I stood up. "I will make this very clear," I said, my voice resonating in the small, terrible room. "Money cannot buy a family, but stealing money will lose a family. The choice is yours. You have 60 seconds. Silence, a thick, suffocating blanket of it. Then, the scrape of a pen. Patrick Ellsworth, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold it, picked up the pen. He did not look at me. He looked at the real asset statement, his eyes full of a dead, bottomless hunger. He signed the first page, the apology. He signed the second, the compliance. He signed the third, the non-solicitation. He shoved the papers, with a violent, jerky motion, to my mother. Nora, her face a mask of ruined pride, signed. She pushed them to Evan. He was still staring at the table, but he looked up at me. One last time, his eyes empty. He signed. Lila, her hand trembling with a rage that made her signature a sharp, angry scratch, signed. Bryce, who had not spoken a single word, the silent, complicit fool, signed last. Mark the notary stepped forward. He took the 3 piles. He reviewed each signature. He took out his heavy metal stamp. Thud. The sound was like a gavel. Thud, thud. He signed his own name, closed his logbook, and stepped back. "It is done," Ava's voice said from the phone. "Compliance is confirmed. The civil agreement is executed. The criminal file is now in permanent. Sealed escrow. Contingent on a lifetime of good behavior from all of you. It's been a pleasure. Ms. Ellsworth, it has not been a pleasure. Mr. Ellsworth, do not contact this firm again." The line clicked. She was gone. I stood there. On the table sat the fake, single-page statement I had brought to the house. The moi. I picked it up. In the dead silence, in front of all of them, I slowly tore it in half. Then I tore it in quarters. I dropped the pieces into the wastebasket. "That," I said, "was the lie you believed." I tapped the real asset statement, still on the table. "This is the truth you will never touch." I tapped the newly signed, notarized agreements. "And this is the boundary, forever." I put my copy of the agreements and the real statement into my briefcase. I turned to my family. They were 5 broken, hollowed-out strangers, staring at the ruin they had built. "I am not promising a reunion," I said, "and I am not sentencing you to damnation. I am choosing respectful silence. Do not contact me again." I nodded to Officer Miller. I nodded to Mark, and I walked out of the room, out of the church, and into the sunlight. The drive back to Flagstaff was a slow climb out of a deep, dark valley. The air in Phoenix had been hot, thick, and suffocating. As I climbed the interstate, the temperature dropped, and the air became thin and clean. When I passed the ridge and entered the high country, the first fine, dry snow of the season began to dust the windshield. It was beautiful. I turned the heater on high, but then I pressed the button for the sunroof. It slid open, and a blast of freezing, pure mountain air hit my face. I took a deep breath, the first one that did not feel like it was being rationed. It felt as if a heavy, lead-lined vest, an armor I had been wearing for 32 years, had just unbuckled and fallen from my shoulders. I exhaled, a long, visible cloud, and it was the sound of release. My phone, Silent on the passenger seat. Buzzed. One text message. From Grandma. Sunday dinner, just us two. I pulled the car over at the scenic overlook, the one that looked out at the vast, dark wilderness of the San Francisco peaks, now just white outlines in the starlight. I typed one single word in reply. Yes. I put the phone down and looked out the window. I thought about the Shield Fund. I thought about all the other people, right at this moment, trapped in a room with a family that did not see boundaries. I thought about the money I had given away, and the freedom I had just bought. I did not choose to be richer. I chose to be free, and freedom needs a password that only I know. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to connect and hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it some extra love by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.